Welcome everybody to Who's Your Band? I am Jeffrey Paul. I'm with Sean Morton today. How are you, Sean?
Losing my mind, Jeffrey.
Why? Losing my why?
You know how in The Shining, Jack Nicholson kind of like lost his mind after a while because of the house and everything.
The
I
hotel?
have a cricket. I have a cricket or a cicada somewhere in my basement, and the fucking thing is not dead. It's been alive for like 7 days. It has no food source. I don't know how this thing is going. I can't find it anywhere. I have no idea, but it's 24/7, and
I
I'm
think
slowly losing my mind.
I think he's doing it out of spite.
It could be like a spite store, like Larry David.
Right. It's a spite store. I've opened up a spite store once. I did. It was a record store. So
What a shock.
I did. I put myself through college by opening up a record store, but I opened it out of spite because I used to work at a record store and I didn't get the hours that I wanted. And I was like, you know what? I can do it just as good as this guy. So I opened up a record store out of spite.
Only person more petty than you is Tom. That's a smart joke.
Okay, listen, enough of this ridiculous preamble because I really want to get into this interview. And
Me
I
too.
had the opportunity to jump in on an interview on 101.5 FM, the show they do on Wednesday with Steve Trevelise. And he calls me up earlier in the week. He's like, hey, look, man, we're going to get Eliot Lewis on. Come in a little early. I'd love for you to talk to him. And I was like, you don't have to say more. I'm there. And we only had him on the air for about maybe 6 to 8 minutes, and there was so much more I wanted to talk about. So it is my pleasure to introduce from the Average White Band, from Hall and Oates, from his own solo career. Okay, I don't even know where to begin when we talk about music and instruments, but it's my pleasure to introduce Eliot Lewis to the show. How are you, Eliot?
I'm doing great, man. Great to be talking to you guys tonight. Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. So,
Yeah.
who got you involved in music?
Oh, well.
Go back to when you were a kid.
Yeah, no, it must be, exposure from my mom, really, because that's about as far back as it goes for me. She was a classical pianist. So, from the time I can remember, I was hearing her play classical music. And then really the specific start of it really was to do more with my brothers. Typical scenario, I had two older brothers that were both music lovers. One was a guitar player and so they were
Older or
oh
younger?
both older. I'm the youngest of three. So between my mom playing classical music and the two of them playing, nonstop for my oldest brother, who was the guitar player, he was really inspired by the British invasion. So Jeff Beck, the Stones, the Who, but all the blues stuff too, Buddy Guy and
So when
um,
your brothers had an album,
yeah.
what would you gravitate to? Or what would they say, hey, Elliot, you got to listen to this? What was it? What was the early music?
Yeah, it was all that. I mean, I was a little bit too young to get the full effect of the Beatles, but I certainly heard a lot of Beatles growing up through them. But it was really the Who, it was the Stones, Zeppelin, but the stuff I gravitated to, I'll never forget. I would always walk into one of my brother's bedroom, and there'd be something playing, and I'd be like, "What is this?" And I picked up a record and I was like to my middle brother was like, "What is this? This looks really cool and really unusual." And it was David Bowie, Man Who Sold the World.
Oh
And
my
I put
God.
that on and I was like fascinated. That was like, "Oh, this is something I really like." Is because the lyrics were sort of like otherworldly. It was almost like science fiction music, you know.
Wait, so you walk into the room. Was it the album that you saw?
Yeah, it was the album I saw.
See, that's
Yeah.
something that this generation will never get. Like,
Yeah.
like remember, like you would go to a record store. I know you're a Pennsylvania guy.
Connecticut.
Okay, so
Yeah.
same like with Sean and I, we're from this area as well. So remember, you
Yeah.
would go into a record store, maybe you didn't know a music, but you would be
Yeah.
looking through the records and you would see like what Maiden's eye, cover look like or
Yeah.
something. Right, this generation will never get that. That's what attracted you to Bowie.
Exactly. I mean, that was the initial thing, the spark that got me to want to listen to it was the presentation of the album, and that happened a bunch. I mean, so the next thing that I really kind of latched onto was Alice Cooper. So we're going back really far. This is like
Okay, he was a real
1971.
visual
I
artist.
was about 9 years old or whatever, and so I was like, "What is this? This is so different." And then to find out the kind of theatrics he did, I really gravitated to artists back then anyway that were very theatrical and very visual with their presentation. I always, that really intrigued me. I always thought there's more, of course the music is at the heart of it, but what they're trying to do visually was always very exciting to me.
Was Kiss in
So
there for you?
oh my God. You have no idea. Kiss goes so far back in my life that I heard, so long story short, I grew up, when I started music, I was a drummer. And my best friend that I met in elementary school had started bass. We started about the same time, but he was about a year older than me. His father was heavily in the music business. He was back then working with a band called Mountain, Leslie West.
Oh my God! And who was the other guy? Felix Paparazzi was in that band too.
Felix Paparazzi.
Yeah,
Right.
they were big contributors to the Who. The Who's next, right?
Absolutely.
What
Absolutely.
was
So
it? Pete
one of my
Townsend?
first,
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
one of my first concerts was West, Bruce and Lang, which was Leslie West, Jack Bruce of Cream, and Corky Lang.
Insane,
So,
insane.
so my friend's father was basically he was an A&R guy. Now this is back, early 70s when I first met them. And so he would typically bring home music for us to listen to because, I mean, he was probably only in his 30s, but we were like, I was probably 10 and my friend Kevin was probably 11 and a half or something. So he always wanted to get our opinion as kids, what we thought of this music that they're considering maybe signing. And one of the tapes he brought home was Kiss. I heard and saw their first demo tape, their press kit, and it was called an acetate. So it was like a record that you could only play like a dozen times before it wore out, you know. But he had that, and I heard the original demo tape, and he would ask us like, "What do you think of this?" And I thought, well, it sounds like heavy Rolling Stones to me. And I thought, well, the makeup is pretty crazy. I don't know if I can get into that, but I was sort of attracted to it. And then, of course, I was, soaking up all the music magazines of that day.
The Hit Parader, Cream. Yep.
Writer, Cream. I mean, I would walk a mile and a half every day to a store to find a new magazine. And, before I knew it, they had been signed. His company passed on them. Now, my friend Rich, Kevin's friend, Kevin's father, he thought there was something to Kiss, and he kind of wanted to sign him. But the company he was with, I think it was called Windfall Music, they passed on them. But before I knew it, they were in every music magazine that you could find, and they just, they just took off. So, and I saw them, I fell in love with them. Not so much musically, just because of what they were able to accomplish and how different and unique they were, and how sort of new it was.
What was on that first demo that you heard?
That was Strutter and Deuce and
Cold Gin.
Cold Gin, exactly.
Yeah, the Strutter and Deuce are just two killer tracks.
Yeah,
I think there's something to be said about like the New York bands and just how gritty New York, between comedy and actors and music. I kind of
yeah,
equate the way Twisted Sister and Kiss got started. They're both theatrical. They both.
yeah,
Listen, when you talk music and you're the consummate musician, they're not the best musically.
nope,
It's not the best singer. You don't have the best drummer. You don't have the best guitars, but there's something there. And I think sometimes and I worked in A&R, and
mhm,
I just sometimes think that um, music critics and just suits in music get a little
mhm,
bit snobbish. But
yeah.
Sister and Kiss, they would sell out these big venues, and no one wanted to sign them to the point where you're like, we have to take a chance because they do have
Exactly.
fans.
Yeah, because the word of mouth was so strong. Like they weren't necessarily selling records at the beginning, but their shows would be packed because everybody was talking about them. I saw Twisted Sister many times because they would play locally at these places called the Fore and Aft in Connecticut, and over Long Island and stuff. So that, yeah, even the Ramones, like you were saying, these bands weren't good musicians, but they believed so strongly in what they were doing. It was sort of undeniable. These guys just were a force to be reckoned with. So it was a great time.
So you play multiple instruments. You said you started out as a drummer.
Yeah.
I know you, I think, as a keyboardist,
Yeah.
from watching Daryl Stubbs, and we'll get to that. I
Mhm.
saw you. I think you played guitar with the Average White Band. We'll get to that too.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a lot I want to go in with that. But how do you have time and how do you practice all these instruments? I mean, Sean plays guitar and he's been practicing for 20 years and he still stinks. Okay. I played drums. I'm terrible. How do you get proficient on these instruments? Where do you find the time to practice?
Oh God, I don't know if I spend that much time practicing. It's sort of more doing. And what I mean by that is, in the beginning as a drummer, I didn't really practice. Me and my friend Kevin, we just jammed every day. We were just playing. So it wasn't
Did you
really,
take lessons? I mean, how do you just start
I
playing?
never took lessons. I'm a completely ear player.
It's amazing.
I think the exposure really to classical music really did wonders for how my ear perceives music and harmony and notes and melody.
So how do you pick up a guitar not knowing where to put your fingers, but yet figure it out? How did you do that?
Well, when I transitioned to guitar, so I played drums from the time I was about 10 to about 16. And at that point, or 15 or something like that. And I really wanted to have the experience of being a songwriter and contributing to the song because I figured out early in my life that I wanted to do this for the rest of my life, and everything revolved around the song, the music. So I wanted to be a contributor to the song. So I transitioned to guitar, but I had a little bit of a head start because like I said, my older brother was a great guitar player. He modeled himself after Jeff Beck. So I heard a lot of Jeff Beck growing up. He's still my favorite guitar player. And so I had a little bit of a head start just being around him. He may have shown me a couple of chords, but really that was it. It was just really being around him and watching him and listening to him. And, it just all gets absorbed. So that was my first transition from drums to guitar. And then, of course, like in 1978, Van Halen came on the scene, and you're like, okay, what am I going to do now? I'm never going to play like that. So I dabbled in a few things, and one of the things was bass. And a cool situation arose where, well, before that, as a guitar player, I had a couple of bands, and all these bands didn't really accumulate to much. Like most kids, when they're playing, they're growing up, they're trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. But I had this opportunity with these two guys that came from the Midwest. I think they were in Chicago, and they played with two of the original Alice Cooper members. They played with Neil Smith and Dennis Dunaway of the original Alice Cooper
Oh my
group.
God. Wasn't Dennis Dunaway just back in the band?
What's that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's in the original. These two were in the original Alice Cooper band.
Yeah, no,
So
but
after Alice Cooper went solo in like 1975 or something like that, Neil Smith and Dennis Dunaway started a band with these two guys, Paul Roy and David Stackman. And I know Paul Roy isn't with us anymore, but somehow this situation arose, and they found out about me, probably through my brother, and they needed a bass player to form this and finish this band. So I transitioned from guitar to bass.
how
And
old are you?
I was about 18 at this point. And happily I did, because I was a huge Cheap Trick fan, massive Cheap Trick fan, still am. And I was so intrigued by, if you know Cheap Trick at all, the bass player Tom Peterson played a very unique instrument, a 12-string bass.
Mhm.
And so I went out and bought a Hamer 8-string bass that was almost modeled after his bass. So I joined this band and had fun and was a bass player for a couple of years. And I was still singing a lot. And we toured up and down the East Coast and opened up for like a Flock of Seagulls and the Motels and a couple other cool shows. And then, then we got into the early 80s, and the technology just started exploding.
Right.
Obviously, synthesizers.
Right.
And so then that was my cue to go into the keyboard world. And you know, so it wasn't like I just practiced this one instrument for years. It's sort of like, I think my goal early on was to become a self-sufficient songwriter. And if I could learn all these instruments, I could really contribute to creating songs the right way. So I think that was really my goal. And artists, you know, I'll go back even further. Artists like Todd Rundgren were hugely inspiring to me, and Stevie Wonder. My brother would tell me so early on in my life, like, you know, these guys played all the instruments on the records. And I was like, how do you do that? How do you do that at the same time? And he would explain to me the concept of multi-tracking and stuff, but it really stuck with me. And I just thought that was so cool to be able to play all the instruments yourself. So I think that's really the first, you know, spark for me to become a multi-instrumentalist and learn these instruments.
That's amazing. Speaking of, I'm on board with you with Cheap Trick, and you'll relate to this. I never told Sean this story, right? So I'm in high school, and I was supposed to go to this party with this girl. This girl was dating my friend Rob Milletta, who I was in a band with. At the last minute, he calls me up. He's like, "Hey, look, we got tickets for Cheap Trick at the Palladium." Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I'm in. I'm going. I don't show up at the party. And I don't think anything of it. That was before cell phones or anything. Monday, we go back to school and the girl is pissed at me. You didn't come to the party. Why didn't you go to the party? And I was like, I went to see Cheap Trick.
Do you remember the year?
It had to be like 79 or 80.
Okay, yeah.
And she's like, so? I'm like, you understand what I just said to you? I went to see Cheap Trick.
You don't get it.
Right. It's like, I'm going to see Cheap Trick. I'm going to say, this is the Dream Police. I'm going to see. Okay. I'm going to. She broke up with me, but I don't regret the decision because I got to see Cheap Trick at their height. I mean, I try to see them every time they come around. I love Cheap Trick. You were talking about
her name was Meryl Streep, by the way.
So Eliot was talking about songwriters, and early in your career. We talked a little bit about this on the air the other night. You got to work with Dan Hartman from West Hanover, Pennsylvania, Sean. And the reason why I bring that up is that's not too far from the club that I have up in Pennsylvania. I mean, if you don't know who Dan Hartman is, you know, he was with the Edgar Winter Band, wrote Free Ride, and wrote probably my favorite song of the 80s, I Can Dream About You. How did you get to work with him? What kind of influence did he have on you? Because the two of you are almost parallel, where he's also a multi-instrumentalist, and the 80s for him really changed his sound. Because if you also remember, I don't know if it was a record company or if he did it himself, but Relight Your Fire was something that was kind of, you know, very, very different than what his real music was about. Yeah.
Well, I met him. The introduction was definitely done through one of my brothers. So the middle brother, in the early 80s, he started working for a booking agency, and that later will work into my Average White Band connection. But he knew Dan, and I had been really, you know, had been playing keyboards and programming and really working on my song catalog. I think
now, is this mid 80s, like 85?
This mid 80s, yeah.
Okay.
I think by that time I probably met Dan around 87. So I might have just signed my first publishing deal, which was with Sony. So now in the 80s, I had been working on my songwriting craft. I wasn't playing live so much because I almost gave up on playing live and being in a band. I just knew.
Were you selling songs to artists?
So basically, I created a catalog of songs in order to get a publishing deal.
Gotcha.
So I got a publishing deal, and they would take my songs and they would shop them to artists.
Gotcha.
And, you know, for instance, like after 3 weeks of being signed with them, Madonna put a hold on one of my songs. She didn't cut it, but she basically took it off the market and said, I'm considering the song to record. So that's what would happen. But right at that time, my brother introduced me to Dan, and being that Dan is like in the next town, he's in 15 minutes away. So he played him my demo, I guess. And Dan said, well, maybe I can use him. He sounds really good at programming and drum machines and keyboard. And so, and I think because I was close, he took a chance on me. And I didn't really have any kind of track record then, other than maybe just being signed to Sony. But I hadn't done any kind of high level professional work at that point. So he took me under his wing, and he put me on Joe Cocker song, the Tina Turner song, Simply the Best. I was there I didn't play on it, but I was there when he was recording, producing James Brown, Living in America. And then I did a Nona Hendrix, Nona from LaBelle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I did the Unchain My Heart single for Joe Cocker, and I played on Simply the Best. So basically, he used me for a bunch of these sessions, and we just hit it off. Now, he was way, way ahead of me in his career. I was really just starting out, and this guy had already hit records. You know, I Can Dream About You already was out, and of course, he did all the Edgar Winter stuff. So he was way ahead of me. But we bonded, and we liked each other, and he took me out to dinner, and we would just hang and talk music, and he kind of just let me look over his shoulder and really absorb what he was doing. So it was an amazing experience.
Was he the most influential person for you in music? You know, getting started or in your career?
Yeah, because he was. I would say he was one of the most. I would say the next stage of my career was working with Average White Band and working with Alan Gorey, the original bass player. That started off that whole thing, was also very influential to me. But they all contributed. You know, they all contributed to what became my journey, for sure.
By the way, we look at what we've already spoke about in 20 minutes, and we're just scraping the iceberg with this guy in his career, because you spend the next 13 years in the Average White Band, and you got to work with one of my favorites. You got to work with Hamish Stewart, and who I got to work with a little bit with on the Paul McCartney tour, Flowers on the Dirt. I think that was 89, okay. Maybe 90. You know, McCartney had a comeback album. He did a comeback tour. I got to work on that a little bit. I was there when he did his press conference and did the he did like a press conference and like did a secret show at one of the Broadway theaters. I was in on that one. And I mean, like Hamish was like, he was a guy like you, bass player, guitar player, you know, and he would flip around.
I never worked with Hamish, so
didn't?
No, I didn't. I took his place. So what happened was that also an introduction with my brother, because he was in this booking agency. He was booking the Average White Band in the early 80s. But by like 1985, 84, 85, Average White Band kind of broke up. They disbanded. And I think there was some maybe tension between Hamish and Alan. Something, whatever it was, you know, they weren't working together at this point. So Alan went into his own solo career, and he had a publishing deal, and he had his own solo career. And then Alan and I came together also around probably 87, and we just became songwriting partners. Again, he was only 15 minutes away from where I lived in Norwalk, Connecticut. And we hit it off. Now, of course, he's about 15 or 16, 17 years older than me. So he's way ahead of me in my career. But again, I'm working with this really accomplished professional songwriter who's had this whole career. And he really inspired me. What a great singer and great songwriter. And we wrote songs every week, you know, in part because we like writing together, but we were also had a quota to fill with our publishing deal. You have to write X amount of songs to turn in every year. And so the relationship grew, and at some point, like around 88, 89, going into, it was probably 88, they decided to put the Average White Band back together again. And I had no expectations or thoughts about joining the band. I just wrote songs for their comeback record. So I take a vacation. I'm out on the West Coast with my brother and sister-in-law, and I get a message from Alan, and he said, they're out in Seattle now putting this new record together. And he invited me to Seattle to be a part of the production, you know, basically co-producing the songs that I wrote for the record. So I get back home, then go back out to Seattle and start working with them. And what happened was somewhere we were out in Seattle for about 2 months working on this record. And they said, you know, there's a club here in town. Let's go play this club. really not make a big deal out of it, just to test out some new material for the record. So we did, and then I think we did another one and maybe a third one, and before I knew it, I was just in the band. All of a sudden, okay, they've got new management, they've got a booking agent, and I'm just a member of this band by default. And so basically, I ended up taking Hamish's place. So Hamish wasn't involved with this. It was Alan Gorey, it was Roger Ball, Aunie McIntyre, and Molly Duncan, the other horn.
Were you on that second incarnation of Average White Band? They did have a couple of hits, and didn't you sing on My School Crush? Is that what the song was?
Schoolboy Crush? No.
Schoolboy Crush.
That's the first version of Average White Band.
Oh, okay. So
Cut the Cake and Pick Up the Pieces, Schoolboy Crush, A Love of Your Own, that was all first original version. So when I joined the band, the album that came out was called Aftershock. And one
did that have Walk On By on it?
No, they did. That was the original.
Okay.
That's the original lineup. That was Hamish. Yeah. And so for whatever reason, I could play a little bass and I could sing, but I never saw myself as that kind of a lead singer. But somehow I fell into the role of being Hamish's role. I had a high falsetto, and I was elected to do those parts, and so I did, and it was an incredible experience. Like, again, I never thought I would be a half of a lead singer in a band like that, but that's the way it worked out. And because I played a little keys, I played a little bass, it was a great role for me, and I contributed a lot to the songwriting. And one of the first singles they had was called The Spirit of Love, that Alan and I had co-wrote. And we got Chaka Khan to sing on it, and that was very cool. So that was released, and I think it made it into the top 40 on the R&B charts back then.
In the live performances, did you sing those songs? Did you?
Yes.
Okay, you did. Okay.
Yeah, basically anything that Hamish
it was you.
I ended up singing. Yeah.
You are who is it? Jason Schiff. You're Jason Schiff taking over for Peter.
He's a great singer.
I love Jason Schiff. You kidding me? I got his autograph back here somewhere.
Nice.
Okay. So after Average White Band, you get a phone call from Daryl Hall, and what's going through your head? Like, did you know he was going to call you?
No. So what happened was, the introduction to Hall and Oates really was because Daryl and Alan Gorey go way back. Alan Gorey being the bass player of the Average White Band.
Right.
They were both on Atlantic Records. Both of their signature records were both on Atlantic, So they had a history, and Alan really was very active with Daryl. Like, Daryl was doing solo records at this point in the early 90s. So Alan was working with him, and he even did some shows with him. So I met Daryl a few times, probably starting around 93 or 94, something like that. And there would be times where we would play, and Daryl would come, he would sit in, and he would see me in the band and see what I did, And after a few times, I remember him being in, we were playing in London, Average White Band's playing in London, and he came and sat in with us. But after the show, I think he was with his manager, he came up to me, and this is probably like, I want to say 97-ish, something like that. Yeah, 97, maybe 98. And he came up to me after the show and he said, "Hey, would you, I'd love to see you in my band," meaning Hall and Oates. And so that's really what happened. And he put the bug in my ear, but I wasn't ready to leave Average White Band at that point. I kind of wanted to see it through a few more years. So I ended up leaving Average White Band by my choice in like 2001. And, it was a great 13 years. I just wanted to experience some other stuff and really get back into my own music and my own career. So that's what I did. I got off the road with them, went full force into my own career. And then after about a year and a half, I got a call from T-Bone Walk.
T-Bone Walk, the great bass player.
Yeah, and I had met him obviously a few times, because Average White Band would open up for Hall and Oates sometimes. So I met T-Bone a few times, and I loved him, and just such an incredible musician. So he called me. I remember it was on January 1st, and he said, "El, it's Bone. I'm sitting here with Daryl, and we're trying to think of somebody that might want to come out on the road and do Daryl's solo tour, like somebody that can maybe play some bass and maybe some keys, sing, maybe
Now,
play some percussion.
this is
And we're
when
like, oh, we got to
Dreamtime.
call Eliot.
I'm sorry. This is when Dreamtime came out.
Yeah, this is when I think Soul Alone came out, maybe whatever year that is, Soul Alone. So late 90s, mid to late 90s, something like that. So
Because that's a
you know,
because that first Daryl solo record is excellent.
yeah, absolutely. I think this was Soul Alone. I think it was what had Cab Driver on it and whatever else there was on it. So I was like, oh yeah, I'd be interested in doing that. It's like a 10-day tour, a couple days rehearsal, and I didn't think any more of it other than that. It would be fun just to get back out on the road and do something like that for a minute. So I did do it, and the tour went great. But at the end of the tour, Daryl looked at me and said, "Hey, you want to be in the band, like the real band, And I was like, okay. But the position that was open that they needed to fill was the keyboard position.
You're a multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah, because they had they already had a guitar player. Daryl, of course, plays guitar, and John plays guitar, so they didn't need another guitar player. So I was, I was like, yeah, I've got to do this. How can you turn that kind of an offer down, But the thing was I was a bit hesitant because although I played keyboards, I did never play keyboards on that level. I knew Bob Mayo. I don't know if you know the name Bob Mayo. Bob Mayo is the guy that plays on Frampton Comes Alive. And he was also in Hall and Oates for a few years. He is the consummate musician, incredible keyboard player. I was nowhere near that. But
are you intimidated doing this?
I was intimidated, absolutely. I was scared of the amount of work and the amount of growth I was going to have to go through in a very short time to learn their catalog to that level where I felt confident.
How did you find the confidence to do it? Because that's a scary proposition. I mean, Sean and I are both comics, and we've done big. Sometimes when you get to open for a big artist and you're doing like a big venue, like you before they're going to bring you out, you're like, what the hell am I doing here? Am I right for this? And then you always got to give yourself a little bit of a mantra. They wouldn't ask you to do it if they didn't think you can do it. But now you're working. I mean, like, man, you're working with one of the Mount Rushmores of the Blue-Eyed Soul movement.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's asking you to play listen, keyboards is a big role in the band.
Exactly. Big role. Daryl wrote a lot of his music on keyboards, and it's very keyboard driven, and there are a lot of them. And but it was really T-Bone that said, "El, you can do this. I know you can do it. I completely believe and trust that you're going to be amazing." I was like, wow, okay. And so I was like, I committed to it. And,
I had found the confidence.
Yeah. And I had about 2.5 months to prepare. So I had a little bit of time, but still their catalog was big. It was like learning 30 songs. And again, stuff that I had never played on keyboards to that level. So I just went for it, and it all worked out.
Did you ever get yelled at?
I never got yelled at. Actually, Daryl can be sort of intimidating, both of them, because they're such great musicians. They're amazing musicians.
Oates is a great musician.
Absolutely. They hear harmony and they hear everything. It's like working with Todd Rundgren. These guys have incredibly developed ears. They can hear instantly if there's something wrong or missing. So Daryl, never ever said, don't play this or do this a different way. He actually gave me complete freedom, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, but I think he liked my approach and just gave me the freedom to approach it how I wanted. So it was a great situation. And beyond that, it turned into a more interesting situation because I did a lot of photography, still do some, but I was really into photography. And I was doing, T-Bone saw some of my black and white photography, and we were out on the road, and Daryl said, hey, I saw some of your photographs. He said, can you shoot us? Because we always need photographs. And I said, sure. And so they hired me as a photographer as well. So I'm now playing arenas every night. And in the first tour, which was really so special, was the first tour I ever did with Hall and Oates was with Michael McDonald and the Average White Band. The Average White Band were the opener. So I went from the Average White Band and now they're opening up for who I'm working with. So it was kind of crazy, you know.
You know, you're making it very hard to like you. I mean, you not only, I mean, you're in these great bands, you're a great songwriter, you pick up instruments, but you also have a fucking eye for photography. I think God's done enough for you already. You know, maybe it's time to give some to me. I think the comment I was going to ask you what makes Daryl so special, but I think you kind of touched on it when you said he doesn't knock you down. He kind of builds you up and lets you make your decisions. And make your choices and give you the freedom to do that. I think the greats do that, whether it be in music or whether it be in film. I got a chance to work with Scorsese, and any decision you made, he made it seem like, hey, it's the right decision to make. You felt very easy, very relaxed. And again, you're working with a Mount Rushmore type of a guy. I think that's what the greats do.
What's that?
I think that's what the greats do. They give you that freedom and in that sense that whatever choice you make, it's the right one. But let's try it a different way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll say this with Daryl and with Todd, they're both very similar. They come from a very similar place, literally and musically. I had heard the same thing about both of them, that they may not praise you, but if they don't say anything, you're doing great. You only got to worry if they say something to you, like, do this differently, or, but if they don't say anything, that means you're doing great. Just being around his confidence was very inspiring. These are guys that, like you said, that they were top of the music business. They were hit makers. And to be in their presence and in their band, they could have the best musicians they wanted.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Do you have a favorite Hall and Oates song?
I have a few. I mean, I love "She's Gone" because that probably
great song. Love it.
It probably has the most history for me. I that reminds me of washing dishes in a restaurant at 15 years old.
That's what music does.
Knowing I had to make money in order to buy equipment and have this life that I was planning on having. And so, yeah, that song has the most history for me. But I mean, I love "She's Gone." I love "Say It Isn't So." Sarah Smile, of course, "No Can Do." I'm not such a huge fan of some of the more poppy 80s stuff, but there's so much great music.
What, like Adult Education?
No, that's pretty cool. But like "Kiss on My List" or "Private Eyes," they're fun, but I gravitate to the stuff that's a little funkier, a little grittier.
You know what I liked? I like more off of, I think it was maybe the last album that they put out. I love "So Close" as a single.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what? Which version do you like better? Because they released two versions. We released a fast version and then a very slow version of it.
Oh, the slow version for sure. The slow version, and that's the version we did.
And he always does it every time.
I love playing that song. Great song. It's a very dramatic song. It just really had some great musical moments in that song.
And as you get older, those lyrics really hit home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you were, again, with Daryl, you were, I think, on just about every episode of Live from Daryl's House, up in Pauling, New York. It's not his house; it's a club. I performed there in April.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. They do a comedy night once a month. So I got to do it. The guy who runs the soundboard, is just tremendous.
Pete Moshe. Yeah.
What was his name?
Pete Moshe.
Pete is awesome. We're trying to work out time. His schedule between our schedules very hard, but we've been trying to get him on the show. That show started off, I remember, I think, as an internet show, and then I remember watching it on Access TV. So a couple of questions: who were your favorite guests? What were your favorite songs on it?
Well, there's a few. It's hard to pick out one. But I would say, the stuff that's nearest to my heart, like Joe Walsh, Cheap Trick, Billy Gibbons, these are all people I grew up listening to. Todd Rundgren, of course. I would say those four were some of the most fun shows for me. So almost any of the music. Cheap Trick is probably one of the highlights, though, for me, because I really love their music so much.
You did. I Want You to Want Me.
Yeah, that's Surrender. I play that in my own show to this day. So yeah, there's a lot. I know it's hard to pick out one favorite, but I would say those 4 or 5 are right equal and on the top of the list. But there were so many other artists too, some newer artists, younger artists, that were great. I loved working with Train.
That was a
Gavin
good episode.
One of the most underrated bands in the last, bunch of years. They're a very, very underrated band.
Yeah, great band, great band. There was a great artist really early on. This is when we were doing it at Daryl's house. Diane Birch, and then Katie Tunstall, of course.
That was. But
There were
she played something like on, I think, was the xylophone or something.
Xylophone, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was great.
I know. I cracked up when she pulled that out to do the bell part in Out of Touch.
Right. I mean, what a great little touch on it. And
I know.
and that was the beauty of that show, was
Yeah.
you're hearing these great songs, but you're hearing different arrangements on it.
Yeah.
And then you would hear like different artists sing different parts on it. Now, I had mentioned on the air, I loved when you guys were with Fritz and the Tantrums, and you did Money Grabber, and I loved the back and forth between Fitz and Daryl. And I thought Daryl sounded insanely good doing that music.
Yeah, yeah. He was in great shape in a lot of those episodes, and he really, got to hand it to him. He likes being spontaneous. He likes mixing it up, because you never know what you're going to get out of it. So he really embraced that sort of the spontaneity of that whole experience.
Was it as much fun as it looked?
It was. Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
Everyone's laughing and having a good. I don't laugh and have a good time all the time. Everyone's laughing.
I love shows like that. Like they even had I think it's called Crossroads on CMT, where they do country artists with kind of pop and rock, and they swap songs too. I think it's a great dynamic, because you got to remember, a great song is going to be a great song, whether you do a pop version, a country version, a rock, anything like that. I just heard a great. I'm going to send it to you, Jeff. I forgot to. It was "Times Like These" by the Foo Fighters. This country guy covered it, completely slowed it down, just acoustic.
I could see that being a country song,
and it just it just proves that if you have a really well written song, doesn't matter who's going to do it, it's going to come out great.
So you worked with Todd Rundgren, and could you just remind me of something, Sean? Jim Steinman, who is probably in my top 3 all-time songwriters. Loved him. He wrote the whole Meatloaf albums. Todd produced them. He was talking about the song 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad. And when he wrote that song with as a country song in mind, and he pictured Johnny Cash singing it in a lower key.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you listen to the beginning chords of that, the first, I think, 3 chords is the same beginning chords as the Eagles, "Bells Will Be Ringing." That's where that came from.
Okay. What a great band they were. Eagles.
I love it. Just saw them recently on their farewell tour. Also, the one other show that I liked with Live from Daryl's House, I liked the Tommy Shore episode.
Oh, great episode. Yeah. What a great example of somebody that's really still on top of their game musically. He could still sing, hit the notes, and really impressive, and a great, sweet guy too. Great player.
He seems it. He could still sing. Another band I go see all the time. I think he's one of the most underrated singers. They're great, but the way you guys did Blue Collar Man, I loved it.
Yeah,
I thought it was great. So, was there anyone who wasn't cool to work with on the show? Like anyone take attitude or anything?
Not really. Nothing that I experienced. I'll tell you a little story, and it wasn't that. It was just unexpected. We work with Green Onions.
Booker T.
Booker T. Thank you. Early on in the show, and normally a typical day doing it would be that the band gets there, we run through, we get our sound, we maybe run through a song or two, and then the guests come. So Booker T came, and he's like he's working out his B3 because they rented him a B3, and he's getting that prepared, and he's going through it, and I'm right next to him, so I just wanted to go over and introduce myself and just tell him how honored I am to be playing with him and thank him for coming. But he had a vibe, and it was like, oh, I don't want to talk, kind of off-putting. And so I kind of like backed away and didn't approach, because I was just reading this vibe that he was like, he didn't want to engage with anybody at this point. So we get into doing the music, and he's loosening up, and he's opening up a little bit, but he was kind of quiet and very reserved, and I wasn't sure if he was mad about something or something was going on. But we get through the day, and the musically it got better and better and better. It was all good. And then we do this dinner segment, this food segment afterwards. And we're sitting there, and at some point it gets real quiet, and Booker says, this is one of the best days I've ever had. And I just thought, wow, I couldn't read that. I thought, he was not having a good day. And here he said, this is one of the best days I've ever had. So
it may have been overwhelming for him too.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I do think a lot of people, even really seasoned people like CeeLo Green came in. And
that was a great episode too.
And you think, wow, CeeLo Green, he was on TV every week, and larger than life personality. And he came in, and he was really shy, or he was really maybe somewhat intimidated. I don't know.
First of all, do you realize who you are and what the band you were part of? I mean, anyone who's in music realize that group of musicians was really one of the most respected group of musicians around. So for an artist to come into your environment,
right,
it has to be. You're looking at them. Oh man, CeeLo's coming in here, but he's going in. It's like, man, I can't look like a fraud in front of these people. These guys are good. They're legit.
Well, there's a lot of validity in what you just said. It's hard for me because I'm still like impressed with everybody that's walking through that door.
Because you're a fan.
And a fan of some of them, exactly. So, but I do realize, and that the band has a reputation, of being a good band, and we're we've got great chemistry, and we get the job done, and we produce good music, and so and then of course these artists are coming in and singing alongside Daryl, so I think that might be intimidating too. So not everybody is super comfortable, but I think by the time they leave, if they were uncomfortable when they came in, they're very comfortable. Very shortly after.
Hence Booker T's comments.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But I would say one of the most, and it was not with me at all, but it was a little bit tense with Kenny Loggins and Daryl. They're both
great songwriters.
They're both amazing, strong, and
personality
in some ways, in different ways. But there was a point where Kenny wanted to have Daryl sing a harmony in a song the way it is, the way it's on record. And Daryl was sort of improvising and doing his own interpretation of this. And I know it was edited out, but at some point, Kenny said, "Hey, Daryl, the harmony actually goes like this." And we could tell that leading up to this moment, there was a little bit of friction going on. And at some point he said that, and Daryl said, "Kenny, we're in Daryl's house. This is the way we do it."
Message loud and clear.
Yeah, exactly. From then on, the air was clear. It's like, okay, just forget about any preconceived way of doing this music, But in his defense, that Kenny is an amazing musician, and he just wanted it done well, where it sounded right and sounded like what's in his head and what he usually gets. But he was in an environment where it's going to be interpreted differently.
The king of movie soundtracks.
Yeah.
I was working with Butch Walker on that on the show.
Oh, I liked him a lot. I like Butch Walker a lot. I thought he was great. He was a little quiet. personality wise, but boy, I respect what he does. Great talent, great producer.
Amazing songwriting. Jeff,
Yeah.
he was in a band called the Marvelous Three, like back in the very late 90s, early 2000s, and then he went solo and put out some amazing solo work. And then he just put out a new Marvelous Three record 23 years later, and they put this song out. It's called My Old School Metal Heart.
Wow.
I played it one time. It was one of those songs when you hear it the first time, you go, shit, I'm going to be here 15 more minutes because I'm playing it.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly written pop song. It became my favorite song of the year. So
Oh, wow.
I've always heard like mixed things about him, how he's kind of like a little bit of off-putting and a little bit of a dick, but
Mhm.
his musically, he's an absolute genius.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Eliot, tell us about your solo career, what's going on. You have a new album out, and I also want to know what songs are you doing in your live set, because you have a ton of stuff to be pulling from.
Yeah, I mean, my solo career is been happening for a long time, unbeknownst to some people out there. I've been keeping this thing alive alongside even I really started my solo career for real when I was still an average white band. I put out my first CD in like 1999, and and then put out a record almost every year or two since then, a lot of EPs, and you know, and so I was literally doing my own shows when I was in Hall and Oates. I would do my own shows alongside them. It was typical for me to, to do on a night off on a travel night, to do my own show. I'd book stuff ahead and to keep this thing going and keep it alive. Because it's really what I'm in it for is, again, it goes back to being a songwriter and having the music be sort of the central point, not necessarily being a musician and just playing. For me, it's the song, it's about the art and creating the stuff. So yeah, I made the decision after 20 years of being with Hall and Oates. Now Hall and Oates, from what I understand or what I see, aren't really working together anymore. So
And there's no animosity there. It's just,
I don't know. I don't think so. I think they're just going into their separate lives and separate world. I was with them for some of the best times. I can't. I'm so thankful. The experiences I had were amazing. But last year was just Daryl solo with Todd in support. So I did that whole year with him. There
you
were
did
no
the show over at the Wilmot.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Anything last year, I was there. And it was so great to work with Todd and Daryl every night, but I had to say, how much more time do I want to put in this before I really give my own career 100%? So I made that decision early this year, and I couldn't be happier. So, my focus is completely and 100%, and I don't have to juggle schedules and stuff, which was kind of challenging, to be honest. To book as an artist, you really need to book ahead, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, even if a year, to get the right shows. And I wasn't able to do that. It was very challenging logistically with scheduling with the two things. So now I'm free to kind of just be 100% artist. And yeah, I have a fairly new record. I put out a record earlier this year, maybe late last year, but it's actually was never really officially released, but it's going to be released in the next couple of months. I'm doing a deal with sort of a great label that have a production company. They comprise a record company, a production company called Factory Underground. And they've done great with some artists. So I'm excited about that. And they're talking about maybe having me on a podcast because of all my experience with Daryl's show. And so we're looking at a lot of different possibilities. So I'm having a great time. I'm really focused on this show that I've been doing now for about a year and a half, which is a live looping show. So, up until about a year.
Explain a live looping show.
So what it is KT Tunstall really helped put the looping thing on the map. So you use these pedals that basically are recording you If you play a passage of a guitar or a vocal or anything, it's
John's a
recording
good guy.
a
He's into
foot
that.
pedal, exactly. So there's some artists that really do great with this, and it's always been fascinating to me. Yeah, and uh, and people always said, man, you should try looping sometime. You'd be perfect for it. So it had been in my mind for a while. And, I wanted to move away from using any backing tracks because I really wanted to be completely free to create on the spot. So it took a while. So what I'm doing now is a sort of a multi-instrumental show. I'm literally playing drums on drum pads with my
There's no
own.
backing band. You're the band.
Yeah, completely. No, there's
Right.
nothing pre-recorded at all. I'm playing the drum parts live. I'm playing the bass parts live. I'm playing the guitar. I'm singing, creating three-part harmony. It sounds like a full band, and it's taken me a while to get it to where it sounds now, but it's really coming along. I'm really happy with it, and it's very spontaneous. It's the closest thing to playing with a band because I'm creating stuff that's different almost every night, and then I'm responding to that. So it's really cool, and I can change stuff on the spot. I can lengthen a song, I can shorten it, I can morph it into another song, I can read the audience and feel where they want to go with something and do it on the spot. It takes a while because it's a lot of mental gymnastics to keep track of where everything is, and you really have to know your arrangements because it's all performance based, So, but it's a challenge, but I'm really loving it. And
What
so,
songs are you? I'm sorry. What songs are you doing?
so I'm doing a lot of my own songs, but I do a lot of stuff from my history. I do a Hall and Oates song or a couple of Hall and Oates songs. Almost every cover song that I play that I didn't write are songs that I've played with those artists.
Right.
I'm playing Hall and Oates, I'm playing Cheap Trick and ZZ Top, and sometimes a Train song and Joe Walsh. But I have a couple of old favorites too. I adopted this one song that I love. I actually put it on this new re-released version of my record. It's an old Gary Wright song, who wrote Dreamweaver, of course.
Dreamweaver, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm doing this song called Love is Alive. It's one of my favorite all-time songs. So there's a couple of other songs there I didn't play. I'm going to probably put in Simply the Best because I actually played on that record into my show. So there's, when people come to see me, they're going to get some of my own material, but they're going to get a lot of stuff that they're familiar with,
No
So
song I can see you doing.
what's that?
Great song. It's Year of the Cat. Has one of the greatest piano intros of a song.
Al Stewart, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know the
That's a
story
cool
with Al.
song.
Oh, it's a great song. If you really
Yeah.
go back and give it a good listen. When he was in England, and when
Mhm.
Paul Simon was first coming up, they were roommates together. And Al Stewart was a little bit older than I think Paul Simon, or they
Okay.
were contemporaries,
Yeah.
something like that. But he was a little ahead of Paul Simon when it came to writing songs, and he had a big effect on the way Paul Simon wrote.
Wow. I
I
didn't know
mean,
that.
yeah, see, Al Stewart, I mean, I think Year the Cat comes out in like the late 70s. But I mean, he had been toiling in the folk scene of London for years in the
Oh, I
60s.
didn't know that.
Oh
Wow.
yeah. I mean, people think like these guys have these overnight success. Like all of a sudden they decide to pick up a guitar, and all of a sudden, hey, we just click. I made this amazing song. This is like 20 years in the making.
Yeah, it usually is. It usually is. There's some exceptions. I mean, you look at Kiss, they formed in 73, and by 75 they were playing arenas, but yeah, usually it's a long, slow burn to
Yeah.
get to that place.
They also had to drive, and they again, guys like Al Stewart and yourself, and they're just consummate musicians and agonize over everything. And sometimes, like you can't be so much in your head. You got to have some cock and balls, is what I always say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the name of the show is called "Who's Your Band?" And so we just got two more questions before we let you go.
Yeah.
So who is your band? Who's your favorite band?
My favorite band? Oh,
Favorite band artist?
favorite
Either
band.
favorite band or artist. Like for me, I probably would have to say right now, it's probably Maiden or Rush. Okay, it depends at what the way the wind blows that day. I have so many bands that I love, or I can just get all. But who's your favorite band?
Hmm. You know, that's a real interesting question. It's such a simple question. It should be such a simple answer, but I don't know if I have one favorite. Yeah, Cheap Trick is up there, but then Jeff Beck is up there, and Todd Rundgren is up there. Zeppelin is up there. You know, they're all in that same a place that I hold dearly. This music that meant so much to me. You know, um, I don't know if I have one favorite. I don't know. It's I should be able to answer that. I don't know again.
Again, for me, like I go down these rabbit holes of listening to Zeppelin, and
Yeah.
then I'll just get stuck on "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," and I got to listen to it about 4 million times, and then I
Yeah.
got to listen to Great White do it and go, "Oh my God, they sound just like Zeppelin. This is maybe the best cover I've ever heard." And then a day later, I could be listening to a band like, a group, or duo like Erasure, and just
Oh yeah,
listening
yeah,
to how beautiful Andy Bell's voice is, and Vince
yeah,
Clarke's synthesizer, and
yeah,
work, and it's just like, I love this now. And then I'll go, no, I want to get a little darker and get into Depeche Mode, and then
yeah.
flip the script, and I'm listening to
Exactly.
George Strait.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
This is the
because I heard
beauty
a
of it.
country song. So
This is the
yeah, I
beauty
mean,
of it.
but it's
There's
interesting.
music for every mood and
Mhm.
every sort of like memory. You know, songs, music is so powerful. I wrote a song about that thing. It's called Soundtrack. It's how the power of music, like you can hear a song that you haven't heard for a long time, maybe come on the radio, and it literally transports you back to the time you heard that song. It resurfaces these memories and these sensations and feelings, and that's such a powerful thing. And so much music does that for us. And
Absolutely. And
I can
I
tell
think
you one of my favorite bands. This band is way, way, way up on the list for me, and I think they were a perfect band. They didn't last for very long, but the Police to me were like literally a perfect
great.
band.
They
You
all
know,
hated each other, but they were great.
exactly. But you know, I mean, what a combination of musicians and what a unique sound they developed. Uh,
Absolutely.
you know, such a dynamic band, of course, but yeah, I mean, just a perfect band. They almost couldn't stay together that long because of their personalities were
That's
just,
it.
you know. I
So
gotta ask you something though,
yes,
because you're a rock head.
I
So,
am.
okay, I don't know your age, but I'm guessing
We're in the same ballpark.
we're in the same general
That's
area.
right.
You remember
We're
a
both
band?
20. We're 27.
What's that?
We're both 27.
We're both 27, exactly.
Go with it, Elliot.
You remember a band called Angel?
Of course,
Mhm.
Punky Meadows.
Boy, I loved Angel. There's another example of a super, super theatrical, you know, glam band.
Wasn't you free in that band?
Greg Gifria,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
They were like they were like rock gods to me.
Yeah.
I discovered them, I think, in '76. You know, obviously they're tie-in with the same record company as Kiss, as Casablanca. And I think a friend of mine turned me on to them, and I was like, wow, this is really wild, this whole white thing and the concept and the visuals. And then I went to see them, and they were like rock gods to me. And now, so many years later, I'm friends with almost all of them.
Oh my
Not
God.
Punky, but you know, Frank Domino and the original bass player I got to know very well before he passed away. He literally spent like a week in my apartment, you know. Felix Robinson, the second bass player. So it's just amazing. These guys that were just like I held so high, you know, now I'm friends with, and you know, and Todd Rundgren, it's pretty crazy.
Love Todd Rundgren. Growing up, I never appreciated him, and as I got older, I mean, you
Yeah,
just realize just what this guy means to to to, to music over, like, probably spanning 5 decades now.
5 decades.
Yeah,
He is, and I wouldn't use this term lightly about any musician, but he really is a musical genius, no doubt
yeah.
about it. He is a
I mean,
musical
between
genius.
being a songwriter, singer, and
Yeah,
probably producer, is just insane.
yeah.
Sean,
Ask
any
it.
end this with the famous Sean question that we ask our favorite guests.
So you're in a band, right? You can play whatever instrument you want.
Yeah.
Now you're going to build your own band with the greatest of all time. What's the band, and what are you playing it?
Ooh, good question. It would probably be guitar, and I would probably have, it would be a minimal band because I'm a real minimalist. I do a solo show now, so it would probably be a three-piece, and everybody would sing, and I would probably play guitar and sing, but I would have one stipulation. I need to play drums at some point in the show.
So who's your drummer?
I just played with some friends, a great funk band at a really nice theater local here. And I got to sit in on drums for a song, and it just reminds me how much I love playing drums. Who would the musicians be?
Yeah.
Wait, that's a good question, because there's a lot to choose from. Well, I have to say one of the best drummers I've ever worked with is Brian Dunn from the band from Live from Daryl's House. He might be my choice for drums. I'm not sure about the bass player and singer, but he would be the number one choice.
Bass player. Who was he? If we got to give him a bass player, who would fit in this band? I know Timothy B. Schmidt, because he could sing the highs.
Oh, he's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how active he is right now. Well, I guess he's still out with the Eagles, right?
Oh yeah, he's touring.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, also, I mean, I've just become obsessed with this band. Again, growing up, I wasn't a fan, but lately, man, I just can't listen to them enough. I love Steely Dan.
Oh, Steely Dan, come on, man. That's incredible music.
I don't know how many Times I've played Kid Charlemagne in the last month.
Mm-hmm. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. That's really, hard to describe their music because it had some jazz influence. It had a lot of musical influences, but it's very intelligent music. It's very mature music.
Right. I kind of feel it's more than music; it's a vibe.
Yeah.
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 So where could people find you? How could they contact you? How should they follow you? What can they do to support Eliot Lewis?
Oh, easy. I mean, obviously I have a website, eliotlewis.com. And I'm on all the social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, all the ones that matter, I guess.
Okay. And any shows coming up? I know you did the show Saturday.
I have one, maybe two more shows, but I have a show coming up in 2 weeks from now. On Saturday, I want to say it's in Connecticut. 2 Saturdays from now. Really cool venue. Actually, this venue has a similar vibe to Daryl's Club. And so that is coming up. And then I'm going to probably do with this record release, this record company I'm going to be working with, or I am working with, we're going to do a showcase, sort of a record release show. And that's going to be in Norwalk, Connecticut. And it'll be sort of an industry thing, but I think it'll be part open to the public. So, but that's something I'll announce on my social media pretty soon when we have a deal with that.
And are you going to be up at Daryl's place anytime soon?
Yeah, probably next year. I played that room a lot. This is the first year I haven't played it. And since it opened, I played that room multiple times. I think more than any other artist has, like into the 20s, so probably next year. But I'm going to be really, because I'm able to do this now and really book ahead and plan things out, I'm going to be making the rounds much more than I normally would and trying to get into a lot of different states that I haven't hit yet. And looking forward to it.
We're going to be following you, and we're going to be pushing your solo stuff, and we're going to be pushing dates that are. I mean, this goes out everywhere, so we'll be pushing dates and anything we can do to help promoting and get people to get into it. Eliot Lewis, man. I mean, guy's got a history that's really second to nobody. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Great talking to you guys. Really great.
And guys, keep listening, keep subscribing, and keep following us. All right. We'll see you next time. Take care, Eliot. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.